This is Steve Bosque, the editor of the editorial page, the opinion editor, and I'm in a coffee shop in North Florida, so unavoidably a little bit of background noise. But Laurie, Rich Levinson, thank you very much for joining us today. Dr. Cartwright, thank you as well. You see the rest of us, Editor-in-Chief Julie Anderson, editorial writer Randy Schultz, Deputy Opinion Editor Dan Sweeney, and Scott Travis, our longtime K-12 education reporter. Scott is not a member of the editorial board. He does not participate in any editorial board decisions, but as time permits, I want to encourage Scott to jump in and ask questions as we continue this conversation. Before we get into the nuts and bolts of actually what's in the referendum question, Laurie Levinson, I have a burning question. I know it's been discussed, and you're one of the voting members of the board. Why did you pick August for the referendum and not November?
August is when the current referendum went into effect originally. So we're just doing the same thing we did the last time. And it also aligns with our budget process. We have our final hearing in September where we approve the budget. And it will be very, very important for us to know whether we have the money from the referendum or not in order to be able to budget appropriately.
Okay, so it's this levy began, or what was initially approved in August, you're saying?
Correct.
You've no doubt seen the statements from Broward Mayor Michael Udine and others. I heard the county commissioners, or I heard Udine use the word trick, that he felt this is a way to trick the electorate because in August you're going to get a much smaller and much more liberal pool of voters than you would in November. What is your response to that?
My response is that's when the school board members will actually be running as well. And that's when the majority of them will get elected unless someone does not receive 50% plus one. So that's also on the ballot then, and people are free to come out and vote in August just as they are in November.
Okay. How well known would it be, in your opinion, that all voters can vote on this? Obviously, it's a referendum. It's open to all voters, but generally speaking, unaffiliated, nonpartisan voters often ignore primary elections.
Well, again, the school board is a nonpartisan race that is on the August ballot as well. So there are not, I believe the judicial races are on there in August as well, which are nonpartisan. So there are many nonpartisan reasons where people should be coming out to vote in August.
Okay. Before going any further, Dr. Cartwright, let me just give you the floor to sort of give not just us, but give the people of Broward County, the best explanation as to why this referendum is needed in Broward County.
We're so grateful to our voters for the current referendum that we're under right now, which will expire next summer. And under the current referendum as it is, when it was passed back in 2018, it was prior to some state statutes, one in particular that came out. And I'll get to that point here momentarily. But what it is funding for us is over $80 million worth of supplements for school-based personnel in order to give them the supplements in order to make the pay that we are giving to them more competitive and also a livable salary. In addition to that, it also pays for approximately 500 school security personnel. And I think especially given what happened yesterday, I think there's a clear understanding as to why that is a need within our organization. And then it also pays for approximately 100 mental health personnel or personnel that support mental health. So this may be some of our school social workers or mental health counselors and such. With this renewal, the rationale for bringing it all the way up to 1 mil versus half a mil is actually it's multifaceted. One of the things is because there was a new statute that went into effect, and under that statute, we do have to share the revenue that is generated from the referendum with our charter schools. Now, previously, there was a criteria that charter schools had to meet in order for them to be eligible to have some of those funds. But now, all charter schools will be receiving funds from this. So that equates to approximately 20% of whatever we generate. So even if we were to have gone back out at the same amount for which we are currently at $500,000, it actually would be a lesser amount because 20% of what we're generating right now would have to go back out into our charter schools. The second thing on this is that we also know that Palm Beach County and Miami-Dade County went for a referendum after we did back in 2018. As a result of that, they actually went for higher amounts than what Broward County went for. So Palm Beach County currently has a 1 mil referendum, and Miami-Dade County has a 3/4. And as we all heard last week, Miami-Dade is looking to go back out and renew theirs, but at 1 mil as well. So for us to remain competitive and to be able to provide those supplements that allow us to retain and to our current quality staff, as well as recruit quality staff into our organization without being in competition to the north and south of us, that is one significant reason as to why we are looking to increase it and go forward at this point. Asking our voters for their approval or not approval, whichever way they're going to go. But we have to ask the voters that we're looking for us to go up to 1 mil. In addition to that, we know that on this, we've set up the formula very specifically to where 75% or more. So in other words, it's a floor amount. The 75% is going to go towards those supplements. And those are supplements, it's not only our classroom teachers, but we're also talking about like our cafeteria workers, our classroom assistants. We're talking about our bus drivers. So it hits a variety of different people all across the board. Then we're looking up to, for our school resource officers and safety staff, up to 17% would be spent in that area, and then up to 8% for our essential programs such as students providing mental health services. So that is the ask, and those are the rationales behind it. Right now, we know that if this does not pass, what's at risk for us is a lot, to be frank with you, because as I mentioned before, the current referendum is paying for over 500 safety personnel out at our sites, our school sites, and over 100 individuals that provide mental health services to our students. So what's at risk? People. That is what's at risk, because this is a referendum about people. It's not about buildings. It's not about construction or anything to that effect. It is truly about people.
Let me interject there. I mean, your very last comment there about this involving people, 500 in the safety realm and 100 in mental health. If this referendum is unsuccessful, are you going to have to terminate people from the school system?
That is a real possibility. Yes, sir.
You mentioned Palm Beach and Miami-Dade. Are they both going to the voters this fall, this cycle?
I know that Dade is going to the voters, I believe, sometime this fall, and Palm Beach, I believe at some point in time here in the very near future, they're going to have to as well.
Okay, November. I want to return very briefly again and raise the point about the two counties that bookend Broward are going to the same well you're going to, but they're putting it on the general election ballot when the turnout is much higher.
You know, you make a very good point, and I'm going to go back to what our chair, Rich Levinson, had just expressed, is they also originally, they went after us. We went in August 1st with the half mil, and then they went with the full mil and the 3/4 mil in the November primary. So the November election. So what they are doing is exactly what we are doing. They're duplicating what we did previously. And it's because of these opportunities that you are giving us today. So thank you. That we want to make sure that we're pushing this information out and that we have informed voters that are happening out there. We are ensuring that we take advantage of as many opportunities to provide information to our community, and that is known widely. That is important to us. We're not trying to hide. We're not trying to pull a fast one. Individuals who are, care about our schools and our education system, typically we would hope that those are the same individuals who would care who their school board members are, which is what the election is in August. And it's a significant number of school board members who are up for election this August. So that is why, again, we're looking to ensure we take advantage of every opportunity for our constituents to be informed, and so that they can make an informed decision, encouraging them to go and vote in August, because we're going to be encouraging them to go and vote August regardless, because we do have school board members elections this cycle. And as I mentioned before, it's a significant number of them who are up for election at this point. So this, for Broward County, this is a very big election cycle for us in August.
All right, thanks for that. I'm going to open the floor now to my colleagues, Randy Schultz and Dan Sweeney.
You mentioned the downside of this not passing. Have you put in any sort of plans, any sort of looked at what exactly you're going to have to do should this not pass? Is there any plan B?
Well, and that's another reason why we're going for the August. To be frank with you, in the event that this does not pass, we need to have the availability of time in order to really scope this out over a period of time. By having an answer one way or the other in August, it gives us 3 additional months almost in order to be able to go in there and start looking at how we're going to move forward and what adjustments are we going to need to make. I am highly concerned about the school safety element of this. And so we're really going to have to look at what does that look like? Where do we go lean on other areas? Ultimately, I'll be frank with you. There's just some things we can't give on. School safety is one of those things. So what that means ultimately is that we're going to have to make cuts potentially in other areas. And it's going to be in other areas that are opportunities. It may be supplemental instruction resources, all the types of things that we do that has a direct impact on our students and their ability to accelerate in their learning opportunities, or to master concepts that are being presented in front of them, or have those enrichment activities that happen. So ultimately, that's what we're facing. So to answer your question, yes, we started having some of those conversations as you're hearing, because I'm giving the answer as to what are some of those areas that we know that we would have to make cuts in, because we just can't afford, to do the cuts within this safety and security. Yeah, because 93% of our budget it really is related to services to students. And so I don't have a lot of wiggle room within our budget, in order to make cuts. And even when you're talking, a lot of times I hear people say, oh, what about your administrative costs and such? For Broward County Public Schools, when you look at the administrative costs compared to other large urban districts here in Florida, we're actually the second lowest. And so it's not as though we have a lot of fat to trim. It just doesn't really exist.
So are you saying that should this not get voted in August, that there's a potential that voters would see something like it in November?
No. In fact, unfortunately, we wouldn't even be able to bring it back for 2 years. It'd have to be back into a primary election again. So a general election, excuse me, not primary, a general election. So if this does not, and we're not allowed to go for it within the year either. So if it fails in August, we can't bring it back in November. We will actually be out a couple of years.
Doctor, are you worried about a campaign against the referendum from the governor or allies of the governor?
What I'm concerned about is ensuring that our voters have the right information, that they are informed on the facts and not on things that may be inflamed or exaggerated in order to make points. One of the things I know that I'm doing is I've already reached out to our brand new commissioner, frankly, Commissioner Diaz. And I've even had the conversation of, can we take a look at how we're funding our school districts, even within the state of Florida? Because South Florida, the cost of living here is astronomical compared to other portions of Florida, for example, Escambia County. And I'm from Escambia County, so, I know what the cost of living difference is between there. And it's night and day. And so to try to look at our funding formula and not take into account the cost of living and the consumer price index that as it is within South Florida, is a huge concern. So if he's going to have conversations, I'm really hoping that he's going to have open conversations and really look at the large picture. While he did provide a lot of additional funding this past for the budget this upcoming year, you have to understand a lot of that budget is being eaten away from other things because other parts of our budgets were cut. And when that happens, how do you balance your budget?
Such as what? Tell us what was added to and what was cut, please.
So for example, there was a hold harmless clause that was in there before. So that's being removed at this point in time. FRS, the cost for the retirement system is increasing significantly, and there's no accounting for that. Our health costs we are self-insured, but still it's extremely costly. We hear it in every industry about the amount of costs related to, healthcare. Our power, Florida Power and Light, it is up, 8.6 million. The cost of gas, we have not been, nothing has been accounted for that. Oh my goodness, if I could show you what my what my diesel bill is, I think y'all would be rolling out of your seats. But we are not getting right now, we're not getting any relief for any of these costs from our governor.
You mentioned hold harmless. What is that specifically?
Just 1 second, because I'm actually going to ask Ms. Marte to talk a little bit more detail on that. She's the voice behind the screen. Is that okay? Ms. Marte.
So thank you, Dr. Cartwright. Emergency Order 6, under the times we had COVID, the state of Florida held all districts across the state, harmless for student enrollment loss. So our money was kept the same in spite of our student population declining. So as a result, we were able to hold staff in place, quite frankly, during a very, very critical time in our nation where people were worried about their future. So it was absolutely the right thing to do, and we absolutely thank the governor for that. But now that provision is gone, which means along with all the additional costs Dr. Cartwright just spoke about, we've got to right size our staff to meet our current enrollment.
And I was going to ask, what is your enrollment compared to pre-pandemic?
We are down about
11,000 students approximately.
Yes.
And
where have you lost them to?
That is something, frankly, that we've been really working on this past year. So we have seen an increase in virtual school, but through the Florida virtual school instead of the Broward virtual school. We've also seen a huge increase on home education, where parents are homeschooling on their students. In addition to that, we also have seen some families have just moved. They've left Broward and the county itself. And so you've got the mobility issues that are happening there. And then there are some, frankly speaking, we haven't been able to locate yet. Even though I've worked with the state's database in order, because we're able to tap into their database to see if a student enrolled in a different district, there's a whole segment of them, unfortunately, that we can't find. And the last element as well, where you're talking about, costs and such as that, because this one's really important, is the Florida Empowerment Scholarships. Unfortunately, the governor has lifted the floor on that, or I shouldn't say the floor, but the ceiling on that. So now our contribution to that is skyrocketing, and in ways in which, frankly speaking, a lot of our students who transferred over into private schools are actually probably generating more money than what we would actually realize.
If you're down 11,000 students, some people might say, why can't you simply scale down your staff and you're okay?
That's a good question. That is something that we're actually in process of doing right now. We are in our budget season right now. We've already gone in with our schools. We've already scaled back our site-based budgeting. In fact, in my reorganization chart, I even started scaling back some of our positions here in central office in order to start right-sizing. This is the first wave of some of the things that we're doing in a very strategic manner in order to right-size the district. But frankly speaking, just because you have a small enrollment at an elementary school doesn't mean you can't have a second grade teacher. You have to offer it.
Or security.
And just because you have a small school doesn't mean that you can't have security present on site. You have to have it. So these are some of the more difficult choices, and these are some of the things that we have to take a look at. When I'm talking about our reorganization and everything that we did in trying to right-size central office, ultimately that gave a cost savings to the district of approximately $2.3 million.
There was that news story recently, Dr. Cartwright, that you're moving some money around and you're putting more money into outreach and public relations activities. Am I right?
I think quite candidly, there may have been some confusion on that because what we ended up doing is we moved some positions around. And as a result of moving some of the positions around, it really wasn't that much of an increase. And I know Scott Travis has the most recent information on that as well. What we've done, frankly speaking, is currently we have 18 positions. There are 6 chart positions, 12 that are administrators and clerical that are not on the chart. But in fact, we even, while we added a director position, we cut 2 communication positions. What we put on the org chart, now mind you, we've got 8 chart positions at this point in time. We have 12 administrative and clerical that's not on the chart. And it may seem as though it's larger because we brought over, when we merged communications and legislative affairs, the 3 positions that exist in legislative affairs are being brought over as well. When you take a look at that, so that's including legislative affairs, we're talking about 23 people. I want to put this into perspective. Orange County Public Schools, take a guess at how many positions they have, and they're smaller than us. And their communications, not even legislative affairs, they have 41 positions. When we take a look over at Miami-Dade and looking at their Office of Communications Community, they're larger than us, but they've got 36 positions. When we take a look at the Houston Independent School District over in Texas, so it was something, again, a smaller district than us, 31 positions. I'm going to go back to it again. What do I have? If I take out so I can compare apples to apples, I've got 20.
But Dr. Cartwright, wasn't that those 2 positions cut from Beacon, which if you count Beacon, you've got a whole lot more than 23 positions, probably about 70 something positions. I mean, I don't believe a heavy equipment operator could be your communication staff, could it?
I would respectfully, I would have to ask for Mr. Sullivan. I believe he's there with the chair to answer a little bit more and give a little bit more perspective on that, if possible. But good point.
Yeah, so communications eliminated, I believe they were both in Beacon, which is the heavy equipment operator and then the supervisor 3.
So if you count Beacon, it's a lot more than 23 positions. I think Beacon by itself probably has 50 or 60 positions.
I'd have to get back to you on that. I don't know. I don't believe we have that many positions at Beacon though.
Okay, all right. That sounds like a point that needs some further sharpening. I want to ask Laurie Rich Levinson a question about something, and Laurie, it's about this survey and about the opposition to the referendum from Tori Alston, who's the new member of the Broward County Commission. We all know he's a Republican. He's a Ron DeSantis appointee, but he also represents an overwhelmingly Democratic district. They're all overwhelmingly Democratic. But Tori's got, correct me if I'm wrong, he's got District 9, so he's got Lauderhill, Lauderdale Lakes, Sunrise. He's got really kind of the heart of Central Broward. He did this survey that was an online response thing. It's unscientific, but he claims to have gotten about 1,700 responses, and 79% of those who were asked about the referendum said they were opposed to it. The form that I saw asked the question fairly straightforwardly. It did not look like it was, slanted one way or the other. What is your view about what he did and what's the significance of these survey results, if anything?
To me, there's no significance to the survey results. First, I would need to see what type, like you mentioned, Steve, I didn't see how he asked the questions, what the questions were. But in order to survey, to me, it's important that you would go in and educate the community properly. He didn't know the difference between the referendum and the smart bond. And the smart bond deals with buildings, the referendum deals with people. So if you don't even know the difference yourself between the two and you're putting a survey out there to the people, I think it's incumbent upon whoever's putting it out to educate the people first before you would ask them how they feel about it.
Okay, and tell me, what's the evidence that he confused the referendum with the smart bond? How so?
I read, I don't know if it was your editorial or something, his editorial in the Sun Sentinel. I don't remember where I read it, or it was something else that I was reading, but he confused the two.
Okay,
that was his op-ed in our paper.
Okay,
Yeah.
he did write a commentary for us. Okay.
Yeah. And Steve, I'll just say something. This will be actually be in defense of the school district as far or against that survey. That survey was not only was it not scientific, it wasn't limited to people in the district. It was passed out through email chains, and you could vote as many times as you wanted to. So there's absolutely no reason to believe that 79% figure is accurate.
Okay, all right. Thanks very much. Let me ask you about something, Laurie, you mentioned about educating the public. Beyond the school board, the board corporate, and the administration of the Broward County School District, whose responsibility is it to educate the public about why this referendum is needed? Who's doing that work?
Well, the place that it rests in the district is with the Office of Communications, but it's the responsibility of all of us to inform the community what this referendum goes to. I really believe if they are clear on where the money goes, this is going to affect, we're the largest employer in Broward County. Our teachers are making salaries that are not commensurate with how expensive it is to live in South Florida. If this amount that we give them from the referendum no longer exists, this is going to affect thousands of teachers in Broward County. So when we talk about them being able to live, and with what's going on right now with inflation and everything else, this is going to be a tremendous burden on our teachers and our employees if it doesn't pass, along with, as Dr. Cartwright mentioned, the security positions and the mental health positions, where we know how important mental health is at this time, particularly with what families have been through with COVID. So I think if they understand exactly how it's being used and that it's supporting people, I think that that's what needs to be done. And it's incumbent upon all of us to be out there educating the public so they can vote intelligently.
And what is your opinion? What do you tell people about the familiar arguments that we've heard, that I've heard against the referendum? For example, you can't trust the Broward County School Board because they've misspent money in the past. It is taking too long under the previously approved bond issue for projects to get completed. The roof at Rickards Middle School, and on and on. What is your response?
Well, I would say, first of all, the referendum has had a third-party audit done, and every bit of the money has been spent exactly as we told the voters it would be spent. So that audit was very important to show that the money was being spent that way. And as far as the bond, again, that's dealing with buildings, not people. But again, the money for the bond has been spent on the scope of work that we originally put out that it was going to be spent on.
Okay, I want to once again reopen the floor to my colleagues, and certainly you too, Scott Travis. You want to weigh in with the question?
Okay, well, follow up on that last point is that I believe, didn't the referendum say it was going to be used for teacher salaries? And then there are all these other positions, and the audit was very unclear about how all that money was spent, you know, and how, like, it didn't really spell out who got the money, because a lot of other positions got money besides teachers.
Well, it wasn't originally, Scott, just for teachers. It was for school-based staff. And so that includes anybody who was connected with a school. So it would be your bus drivers, your custodians, your maintenance workers, your guidance counselors, anyone who's tied to a school. That's where the money was spent for the referendum. It wasn't exclusively teachers. It was school-based staff. The majority of those were teachers, but there were other positions that are tied to schools.
One of the things, there's been very few details that have come out about how this money is going to be spent. We only know the buckets and how much is going to go for teacher supplements, safety and security, mental health, etc. One of the complaints I've heard from some teachers that were like the pay for performance teachers was that they ended up getting, you know, only a $1,500 referendum. Now, I totally get that that's negotiated with BTU, so they can blame them for that. Fine, but my point is that can't this be done before people go out to vote so they know exactly what they're voting for? Mr. Runcie had said when he pitched this back 4 years ago that people would be, you know, teachers would get an average of a 6% raise. Some did, some didn't, but a lot of people felt very shortchanged by what they got, whereas maybe if they knew it ahead of time what they would or wouldn't get, and that would just require doing negotiations with BTU and ahead of time. So why is it, and the same thing for the other buckets, I haven't seen any justification for why you need the exact number of positions that you do, especially since you haven't even been able to fill a lot of those jobs in mental health and safety and security.
So I want to jump in on a couple things, if that's okay, Scott.
Sure.
Thank you. I want to go back for a moment related to the audit, because that audit was done by a licensed CPA firm. It has a highly reputable firm here in Broward County, as well as the counties around us. In addition to that, what they did audit was to determine whether or not what was promised to the taxpayers, did we deliver on that promise? And that is what was, in essence, was what was audited. And the audit
back said there's too many questions. So
I respectfully disagree with you, because during that audit committee meeting, it was only a couple people that were stating that, and yet you had other people that were stating otherwise. There were conversations that were going on. In fact, one person even spoke up and said, "You're questioning a licensed firm." So there was disagreement amongst the.
I know that it may not have been unanimous, but the end result was the audit committee postponed it and asked for more information, and they did not transmit it like they normally do every other audit that they approve.
Well, and again, I just want to. I want to go back because I think it's very important. The findings of the audit was that it was a clean audit. In other words, they did not have any findings related to this. Did we spend the money in the way in which we promised our taxpayers? That was the essential question for which they were auditing. And the answer is yes. As to you're wanting to know very specific information, I can give you very specific information. For our current referendum right now, within security, the minimum to maximum annual amount ranges from $380 to $2,000 with an average of $542. For teachers, minimum to maximum is $760 to $13,500 with an average of $4,000.
I hate to interrupt you, but people aren't. That's already passed. I'm talking about what they're going to be voting for. We're asking them to vote on that, and I haven't seen a very detailed plan of how this new money. You're getting a lot more money than you have now, so that's why there hasn't been a detailed plan of how they're going to be spending the new money that would be coming in.
A lot of that is because these are a part of our negotiation process with our unions. And so those are things that we still have to go into bargaining with our unions before we're able to allocate those specific amounts going forward. So that is why that information has not been released just yet. We are.
All right, sorry. Is there a way to even, we all understand how collective bargaining works, but is there a way to even give a minimum and a maximum for the new money?
Unfortunately, at this point in time, we're not at a place where I can talk about that until we have those bargaining conversations, because I need to be able to go to the table, with a clean slate, as you might say, in order to truly have a bargaining conversation. And I appreciate you understanding that.
Sure, okay. Laurie, you're the elected official who's here, and you know how Broward politics works, and this is an election. Obviously, and the voters are going to have the final say. How important is it that the best known elected officials in the community all very resoundingly publicly endorse this referendum? And I'm thinking of people like, in no particular order, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, Marty Kerr, the sheriff, the school district, and what the school district does affects people in a multitude of ways. And like as you both had said, it's the largest employer. If this thing's going to pass, it needs to have the weight of the political leadership in the community strongly behind it. Tell me if you have that.
I think we're really at the position now where we're just starting to reach out to all of those people. And I think it is important, as you said, that we have all aspects of the community with us. And it's going to take time to get out there and educate. I know that our staff, our board members, our superintendent will all be going out and spending a lot of time with elected officials, with communities, and educating once again so that people fully understand what this entails and that this is really a people initiative.
Okay, I've got a related question about that, and I want to encourage my colleague Randy to jump in behind me on this. This is really important. There's a fine line. This is a government proposed tax increase, tax renewal, tax extension, whatever you want to call it. And there's a fine line in the public, it's in the eye of the beholder, where providing information ends and persuasion begins. Every government agency that has done a referendum like this has gotten into trouble because they're accused of spending taxpayer money for political persuasion. So where is that line and how does that work? Am I correct? I mean, you can't be spending taxpayer money to urge people to vote for this thing. You can raise private funds for that. What is your understanding of how the law works regarding using Broward taxpayer money to persuade people to vote for a referendum?
That again, we're able to go out and educate the community. We can't go out and tell them, please vote this way on it. We give them all the facts, and we hope that when they see the facts and how it's going to affect the school system in the way that it has been and that it needs to continue, that they will make that decision to do that. But we are going out and educating and giving information, as you said.
I've got a multi-part related question on the district's credibility. Dr. Cartwright, I'm sure you're aware of the reporting that earned the Sun Sentinel the Pulitzer Prize 3 years ago about the district's actions regarding Nicholas Cruz. Do you believe that the district's top administrators engaged in a cover-up of the district's actions regarding Cruz?
I'm going to be very candid with you. That is some of the areas that I've been waiting for this grand jury report to come out on in order to get an objective overview as to what occurred or did not occur. That is an area, there's information that I know that, frankly speaking, I have not asked because I don't want to accidentally bump into information that I'm not supposed to have at this point. So to comment as to whether or not I believe there was a cover up or not, I'm not in a place to where I can make comment on that. And that is intentional because I do not want to get in the way of someone saying, oh, someone leaked information to you related to the grand jury report.
Okay. Second part is the district also has gotten a lot of criticism for not being forthright about reports on school safety?
I'll tell you this
And
much.
do you think that things are any better? Have you changed policies on reporting?
What I can tell you is that even Sheriff Garretieri, from the head of the MSD Commission, came down here recently, did an on-site review at my invitation because I wanted him to see firsthand what is going on inside of Broward County Public Schools. He was so pleased by what he saw. He wants to make sure at the upcoming commission coming in August that we're going to have the ability to share the actions and those things that we have taken underway at this point in time in order for other districts to learn from what we are implementing in Broward County Public Schools. We are now going beyond just what is expected, and we are now transitioning into this exemplar and into a golden standard district as we go forward. There are things in place that I think are very important. I mean, even today is a perfect example. Sheriff Tony says, okay, we're going to have a press conference this morning related to what happened yesterday. Literally last night, I pick up the phone, I call him, he answers. We're having conversations. I send out an information to the head of the Chiefs Association. Immediately, information is going out across all of our municipalities. Our relationship with our first responders has increased significantly. Our coordination, ensuring that we're doing things in tandem with one another, is something that has definitely gone in the right direction. When it comes to reporting, he's even taken a look at the amount of reporting that we're doing compared to what other districts are doing across the state. And frankly speaking, we're kind of right there where we really need to be. And in some cases, even feel, there's a possibility that we may be over-reporting.
And you're speaking not just of protecting schools, but of what happens in classrooms, complaints about disruptive students?
I'm talking about our ESRA required, state required reports. So anytime it hits a certain level or a certain type of offense, we are required to report that through a state system. So those are the things that I am talking about. I'm also talking about with our behavior threat assessments. Are we at 100% yet for compliance? Not yet. Are we getting close? Yes. We are getting better every year. We're learning from our mistakes. In this past audit, some of the things that we found was that we found that our policy versus our practice manual, there was a misalignment. So guess what? We fixed our practice manual to align to our board policy. And so that's where some of our schools got caught, was because they were following policy, but the manual, which policy refers to the manual, had different criteria in there. So now it's a match. We fixed the problem. In addition, I'm also having conversations with my board. We've already had, we've also had a conversation related to ensuring that we fall a little bit more in alignment with what is required by the state. We had tighter timelines. There is a fine balance between making sure that we're being responsive, making sure that we are meeting the state guidelines and what's required by state, versus over expecting. And when you put a threshold too high, or you put that bar way too high, then ultimately it causes actually a failure of the system that way too. So we're looking to go back to what the state guidelines are as to the timelines for reporting on behavior threat assessments. We're also in transition. So we are now, for this next year, not only are we looking at compliance, but we're looking at quality of the plans. And that you have to have both. I'm great. We're getting much better as far as compliance is concerned, but I want to ensure that we have quality in place. In fact, as a part of my reorganization chart that I put into place that was approved by my board last week, we now have a new position. It's an executive director position. That's their sole responsibility, is to overlook and oversee our behavior threat assessments. They're to work with our directors of teaching and learning out in our regional offices, as well as our regional superintendents, in order to not only look at compliance, but also to talk about quality of the plans.
And finally, this is not a safety issue, but it is a credibility issue. Have you made any changes in the construction department? Because the district, mostly predating you, but you're in charge now, has taken lots of hits on not being able to do simple projects.
Certainly. There's one thing I think that's really important. March of 2021, we had approximately 235 total projects. March of this year, we had 353 projects. So in active project construction, we currently have 174, and construction closeout, we've got 93. Compared that to last year in March at the same time, and closeout construction, we had 21. Now we have 93. When we talk about project construction, last year was 119. Right now, we've got 174. So we are, when we're talking, even with just like project planning, last year we had none. This year we at least have 5. Our project design, there is a decrease in that number from last year to this year because it's been transferred over into active construction. So last year, what project design was at 52, this year we're at 31, but again, is because it's transferred over into project construction. When you take a look at that, and you take a look at the number of projects in construction, and Broward County Public Schools, as I mentioned before, I'm rounding numbers, okay? So we're right around 170, 180 projects in construction. When we take a look at Palm Beach County, there are 73. That's how many. When I take a look at Orange County Public Schools, 22. Excuse me, that's not Orange County. Orange County is 18. And then when I look, Palm Beach County, they have 22 projects and constructions. So the amount of construction projects that are currently underway is significantly high at this point.
But how much of that is because stuff's been delayed and just didn't get done when it should have, if any?
A lot of this is because I've really been staying on top of ensuring that with our outside project management with AECom, that with the adjusted timeline that they had brought to their board, I believe within the past couple of years, that I'm holding them accountable to that. And I'm pushing forward, and we're having those very real conversations. I'm not looking for excuses. I'm looking for action.
A couple of questions. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Scott. You want to go?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, there was when we looking at the safety positions that are going to be funded. And again, we don't know how much of an increase, but I get the need for safety on schools. But you also have at least, I think, maybe 15 safety areas, safety managers that supervise people, and obviously one was supervised so little last year that he was working a second job as a Florida Memorial University police chief, which made me wonder how much these positions are needed. Now I've been told that and I haven't confirmed this with the district, but what people have been saying is that you're going to be giving the supervision of the campus monitors and the security specialists over to principals, which would give these folks even less to do. So is it really necessary to have that many middle manager safety positions?
So we are actually going to be going into conversations related to that over the course of this summer. So no final decision has been officially made related to the assignment of CSMs to our school principals. Again, what I have told my school principals as recently as Tuesday was that, or not Tuesday, Monday, was that we are looking, this is a direction that I'm looking into. However, we have to have conversations this summer. The rationale on that is because I do want to make sure that we continue to have a checks and balances system if that indeed is the direction that we decide to proceed. So to Mr. Travis, to be frank with you, if we go in that direction, and I'm going to say that word again, if we go in that direction, the role of the ASM is going to be very similar to what they're doing right now, because that is your checks. Because we want to not only have potentially our principals being responsible for the campus security that happens on their campus each and every day. But we want to have outside people who are coming in, monitoring, actively monitoring across this entire district, that we are meeting the standard for which I have set for this district related to school safety. And that is happening on a day-to-day basis. We also have to have a resource that's available to our principals who may not be comfortable having those type of conversations and within the school safety realm. And so these are individuals that are experts within that realm, and will be able to provide that support for any type of critical conversation that must occur at a school site. In addition to that, if we have a campus security individual who is not comfortable and feels as though that the principal is taking shortcuts, or maybe they're not doing what they should be able to do, by continuing to have that role and a way and a path. And that's, again, some of the things we have to work on as far as clearly defining a communication strategy as well as a chain of command structure. So that if something to that effect is occurring, then we have a path for them to be able to talk with somebody that will not result in any type of disciplinary action or for fear of retribution, because school safety is very important. So hence we must set it up to where there's a check system, a check and balance system to this. So that role continues to be a role, at least at this point in time, that would be needed if we move in that direction.
Okay. My final question that I had was, and this may involve Miss Marte if she wants to make sure she's listening. But one of it's a more general and one of it's a numbers specific. But the more general question is that, you keep talking about you need to raise it from a $500,000 to $1 million. I'm familiar with all the reasons, the charter schools splitting that money. But one of the things that I haven't heard you mention is property values going up. Palm Beach County told me one of the reasons why they didn't need to increase, now they were already at $1 million to begin with, but they said that they were, even though they had to split money with charter schools a long time ago because of a lawsuit, it ended up, they still did pretty well because the property values had gone up. So, that makes me wonder, could you not have, done this with a 0.75 or even maybe, and then the other thing is that the number, this is the thing that Ms. Marte may need to address, is that the figures we were given was that the average homeowner would pay $274 a year, up from $120 currently. Now that is more than double, but then that's based on a $393,000 house with a homestead. But then I was also told that the money would provide the county, and this includes charter schools and everyone, with an estimated $223 million a year, up from $115 million. So that's less than double. So if you're getting more than double from the average homeowner, I'm not sure why the total amount is less than double. And is it possible that you could be understating the amount of money that you're actually going to be receiving?
So I missed a few of your numbers, Mr. Travis, so let me answer the best I can. So first of all, we do not know what the referendum will yield, what we'll get for actual revenue, until after. First, the preliminary tax roll is released in June, and then the final tax roll upon which we build our budget is released in July. You are absolutely correct. It should be substantially higher based on the escalating property values across the community. The information that you received, that the first numbers you gave me, going from, I'm going to do it on a monthly basis, $11.50 a month to $23 a month, and $6.50 a month to $13 a month, which agree with the numbers you just provided.
For condos.
For condos is absolutely correct. So the actual yield, the part of that question, I don't have the other numbers in front of me, but the amount we generated was included in the audit as revenue, and that was all audited and proven. The money that we get is easily traceable back to the county. It is in a separate fund. As you know, we have to budget by state law on 96% collection of that money. So I'd be happy to sit down and look at what you're looking at, and get you a follow-up to that.
Why the gross that that the county's receiving, and again, this includes the amount you're giving to charter schools, why that would be less than double when the average home owner is going to be paying more than double.
It's not less than double. So that's why I need to see the base that you're doubling, Mr. Travis, to look at it.
Okay, that was on the one of the sheets that you did when you approved the referendum. I think for the allocation of the money back at the special meeting a few weeks ago. That was on the slides. The 223 million a year up from the 115 million a year. So I don't have any doubt that the 115 million a year, you would obviously know what that is because that's already happened. But you're projecting the total yield to be 223 million, which would be less than.
I'll have to look at that, Mr. Travis. They might have used the estimated roll that we would have gotten from the state, which would have been stale numbers.
Okay.
But I certainly will get a follow-up to you on that.
Ms. Marte, this is Steve Bosquet. I want to know if you could please go over the figures. You mentioned from $11.50 a month to $23 a month, and from $6.50 to $13. Go over that one more time. And
So the cost,
I can give that to you. So at an average home value of $390,000, homeowners would invest approximately $270 per year or $23 per month. That is an additional $11.50 more than their current investment right now. At an average condo value at $190,000, owners would invest approximately $150 per year or $13 per month, which is an additional $6.50 more than what their current investment is now.
okay. I want to return to something we discussed earlier in this discussion and go back to Laurie, Rich Levinson. I'd like a little bit more clarity on something because I have a feeling it would be on the minds of not just voters, but district employees. Laurie, if the referendum does not pass, are the jobs of full-time instructional staff in the Broward School District in jeopardy?
We haven't had a formal discussion, but in terms of instructional staff, I wouldn't say that their jobs are in jeopardy. I would say that the district's in jeopardy of losing significant people from our instructional staff because we would not be able to give them this additional money that they have been receiving for the past 3 years since the original referendum. So it's not a question of not us releasing them, but them maybe making a decision to do something else or to go to another district where they do get that amount.
Okay.
So you're saying that if you don't get the amount, that nobody's losing their jobs, but they may choose to go elsewhere
They
because
may
they're not being
choose
paid.
to
Is that right?
go to other districts. They may choose to go into another profession. As you know, the legislature does not fund education to such a high level in the state of Florida. So that is the need for us to be able to give them this supplement to their salaries in order for them to have a wage that they are able to live on.
But the legislature says that they fund it at record levels every year.
They did fund at record levels for Florida, but when you look at other states across the United States, our per pupil funding is in the bottom of the 50 states. So,
All right.
and South Florida, as you know, is one of the most cost-burdened places to live in the United States, yet the funding has not kept up for teachers to be able to live the way they need to live in South Florida.
I'm a little concerned with what you said earlier about, or actually I think it was Dr. Cartwright said earlier, that, the exact numbers of minimum, maximum payment to teachers aren't really known because you can't do that before negotiating with BTU, which I get. But aren't you asking voters to vote on something without them having all the facts of what exactly they're voting on?
I think what's really important again is knowing that what we're going to be bargaining on and where that is we've already established that the floor of the
Same as last year.
the referendum is at 75%. Now, it can go higher than that. But the floor for that is whatever the monies are generated by the referendum, 75% of it will be going back into stipends.
Okay, I appreciate your time and your patience with going well over an hour here. I've got one last question.
Yes.
And that is this. We've been at this for over an hour, but we haven't discussed in any way what is certainly on the minds of every voter and everybody in America, and that's the horrible events in Texas yesterday. And so anybody who has children in school, especially in an elementary school, I would think would have an extreme heightened sense of urgency and concern about the safety of their kids in schools. And so I respect the fact and appreciate the fact that the decision to put 75% of the money in, employee compensation and 17% in public safety and I believe it's 7% in mental health, those proportions are probably already set. But is it possible that this might have greater public support if the emphasis were placed more on school safety? Or do you feel that the emphasis is in the right place with employee compensation here?
I think the emphasis is in the right place as related to employee compensation, because when you're taking a look at this, with us going for a full mill, we're already amplifying the amount of funds that are coming in. So even though the percentage, it may seem like it's just, when you're looking at the actual percentage and you're like, well, that doesn't make a lot of sense. We're talking about, 8% going to mental health, but it's 8% of what denominator, right? And the denominator is going to be much larger than what we have currently. So it's going to be an expansion automatically as a result of that, because we're generating additional funds compared to what we are generating right now. So when you take that into consideration, I think that's an important fact for our voters to be aware of, is that while, yes, we're talking about 8%, when we're talking about 8% for those essential programs and up to 17% for school resource officers and safety staff, the amount that you're calculated, that total amount is significantly higher than what we're generating right now.
Okay, understood.
And Steve, I just
Yes.
wanted to comment also with some numbers that currently it's about 22 million going to that bucket, safety and security, and it would be approximately 30 million. So we're still talking about a significant amount of money that will be going to safety in our schools.
Okay, thank you very much.
And do you mind if I loop back around, only because I like being correct? I don't like being incorrect.
Sure.
And y'all were talking about with the communications division and going back. Mr. Travis, Scott, you had a very good point. Looking at beacon positions, when we're taking a look at it on the chart positions, there are 7 on the chart positions. So again, it's comparatively speaking to other districts, we're still very staffed lightly compared to others. But I just wanted to make that clarification.
Okay.
And I just want to let you know, those numbers I just gave you are approximate numbers, but just so you would have an idea of how, the amount, the bucket that we're talking about for safety.
Dr. Cartwright, as part of the public education component of this campaign, is Broward going to be telling voters in Broward County, apples to apples, here's what we're spending on something, and here's what Palm Beach is spending, and here's what Dade is spending? Are you going to be doing that?
Part of our information is ensuring that our voters are aware of the differences within the millage rates as to what is currently in place. As to putting that into dollar figures, I'm more than sure we can work with with our choices of their choices. as to how much money the referendum generates for the counties surrounding us, we would be able to provide the amount that the referendum overall is generating. However, how it's dispersed within those districts is different. So I would want to be careful about that, only because how Broward is utilizing the referendum is different than how it looks currently in Palm Beach counties as well as Miami-Dade County.
Okay. All right. I want to thank you both for your time. Thanks for answering all these questions. I and my colleagues will circle back with John and circle back with your staff with follow-up questions for sure.
We
And
appreciate
I just want to thank you all as well for taking the time to speak to us about this, and we really appreciate it.
All right.
Thank you, folks.
Thanks so much.
all so
Bye.
much. Thank you.
Bye.
All right. Have a good one.
Thank you. You too.